Let's start building the perfect country tone and bring some pedals into play. So I'm going to use the Fender Deluxe Reverb for this, as that's my personal favourite amp, and also it's the amp that I use for everything on countryguitarplayers.com. Now, a good rule of thumb is to push the amp as loud as you can without it breaking up before you start to bring pedals into play. That way you know that you're getting the most out of the amp, you're getting the most full tone you can possibly get before you're then adding to it. Another good rule of thumb is less is more, especially when it comes to country, because you want to keep as much cleanliness and clean tone as possible. And the same goes for if you're tracking guitar. You want to keep that tone as clean and crystal clear as possible, and even in the plugin strip section of your DAW, you don't want to be adding too many plugins because you want that clean tone to be shining through the mix. So I like to push the volume of the amp first and then the gain, so that I'm getting as much possible volume out of it, whilst also getting the gain just right, so we're just hitting that point where it's about to break up but isn't quite there yet. Almost there, maybe a little bit more. Let's see if we can push it. Sounding good to me. Let's just see what happens if we bump that gain a bit too far. So you can just hear it starting to break up there. So let's just knock that gain down a tiny bit. Cool, just down a tiny bit more. Awesome. EQ wise, we're going to keep it relatively flat, but personally I like to bump the treble up so we're getting a nice bit of clarity to the top end of the tone. Maybe let's just knock that gain down a tiny bit. Awesome, sounding great to me. Let's introduce the compressor pedal. Now, compressors in their own right are an absolute rabbit hole, and you could spend years getting your head around how they work. I'm using the Ego compressor by Wampler pedals because it's used by a ton of country guitarists and it simply sounds awesome. Now, the point of a compressor is to give our notes plenty of sustain whilst making sure that quiet notes are nice and clear and loud notes aren't too loud and breaking through the mix. In a country setting, they also help us get a nice tone, as when we're twanging those strings, they really help bring out a bit of a spanky side to them. So let's turn it on and see how it sounds. Another good practice is to match the volume level on your compressor to the volume level that you're already getting out of your amp. That way, when you're turning on your compressor, it's not going to blow out the speakers or you're going to get a distorted signal through your DAW. That being said, you can also use your compressor as a boost pedal if you're not quite getting the volume level you want out of your amp. So let's take a look at the other features of a compressor pedal. The sustain is exactly what it says. How much sustain do you want on the note? How long do you want it to ring out for? If I turn this all the way down, not too bad. Let's crank it back up. We're getting a lot more of a fuller sound for a longer period. So let's put it a little bit lower than that and see what we get. Sounds nice to me. Cool. Let's take a look at the tone knob. Now again, the tone knob is going to confuse things a little bit because we've already got an EQ on our amp. But we're not just talking about the tone of the amp, we're also talking about the tone of the compression. So let's turn this all the way down and hear what we get. Now let's turn it all the way up and hear what we get. Now everyone's taste is different, but personally I like it a little bit more to the lower side because we're already getting a pretty trebly top end sound out of the amp. So let's just put it at sort of the 11 o'clock position. Now let's take a look at the attack knob. So the attack is simply how quick is the compressor going to kick in. If we have it all the way down, it's going to kick in immediately. And combined with the sustain, we're going to get an immediate response from the pedal that's going to let the notes ring out for as long as possible. If we put it all the way back, it's going to kick in further down the line a little bit after you play the note. Personally, I like the attack to be quite quick, so we're getting a nice compressed tone straight off the bat. Finally, the blend knob is essentially how much of the compressor do you want to hear. Let's take a listen to how it sounds all the way down. Which is essentially off. And let's have a listen to it cranked all the way up. Again, personally, I like quite a lot of compression, so I'm going to have that cranked pretty high. There's nothing wrong with having that blend knob cranked all the way up, because if you're tracking in a studio, the producer's most likely going to add some compression to it afterwards anyway, and this way you're in control of your tone and you're getting the exact level of compression that you want to help influence your playing. So let's take a listen to our tone now and have a listen to where we're at. Now that we've got our amp sorted, we've got our compressor sorted, let's bring in some delay. As mentioned earlier, I'm using the Aquapus delay by Way Huge Electronics, which is an awesome analog delay pedal. You can get tons of tones out of this, but personally I like to use it just to get a little bit of slapback that helps fill out the tone a little. Now there's tons of different delay pedals out there. They've all got different settings and different variations and different ways of getting to the tone that you want. But this pedal is relatively straightforward. We've got three knobs: the delay, the feedback and the blend. The blend is essentially a volume control for how much you want to hear of the delay. The feedback is how long do we want that repetition to go on for. And the delay is how much of a gap do we want between each notes. Now I want to use this for a nice simple slapback. So slapback is basically a really short and quick repetition of the notes after you've played them. Let's see what we get with these settings. Cool. For me, the volume's a little bit loud on that. It's a little bit too much in the mix. Feedback is probably just about right, but I'm going to turn it down a tiny bit. And the delay, again, is maybe a little bit too far away. I want it a little bit shorter. And just as a reminder, let's hear how this sounds without the delay. And now with the delay. For me, a delay pedal just softens the tone a little bit, blends really well with the compressor, and just helps fill out the mix a little bit.